Can you see the calendar on the wall?
I can. Yeah, it's all right. It's okay.
Oh,
I know.
right. Okay.
So yeah, it's the 12th of September today. So we're going to move on to a different topic. We'll come back to the previous ones another time.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about kind of a little bit about how the world's changed, but predominantly how it is for children. So what is different about growing up today than when you were a child?
Well, I probably had more freedom um, in those days because the restrictions were not as many as they seem to be now about don't do this and don't go there. Um, the main things that we had to worry about was keep off the grass mainly. Um, I can't think of many more. I think the way of bringing up a child now is more scientific than what it was when I was a younger. Thinking of my parents, um, I was allowed to do certain things, but I did a lot of things that I was not allowed to do. Um, so that was because I was given a certain amount of freedom and in my timing. Um, that's between getting up in the morning, say on a Saturday, and what I did on that Saturday. I think if we had played at finishing of school at 4 o'clock home,
Mm-hmm.
something to eat, going from Dartmouth Road into Glenthorne Road, and that's where the gang was. That's where most of the other girls and boys lived. And we would play any assortment of games, which I think I've told you before, like kickball, trot. Because there was only one car on the left-hand side of Glenthorne Road, which was, I don't know in distance, but maybe it was an eighth or a quarter of a mile long and only one car on the left. Um, Jeffrey Wiseman, my friend, his father had a motorbike and sidecar,
Yeah.
which he used to drive to and from, and he was a naval commander. So he wasn't too high and mighty riding a motorbike. Um,
So what are some of the examples? You said, a lot more freedom, to do, what sort of things do you mean?
well, I mean, where I lived in Compton and in Dartmouth Road, say start from there. And most of the time that I can probably think about is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, this sort of age, growing up into a teenager. Um, because if you walked along, I could come out of Dartmouth Road and turn left. Vernon Road was in the middle, and it was Glenthorne Road where the gang, if you like to call them that, lived. Um, and probably discussed the night before, even though we were at school, if it was a weekend coming up and we knew that we were fairly free, or they were fairly free, we said, how about we cross the railway line and go over to Langston? And there was various areas of Langston that we could go to,
Mm-hmm.
past the golf course, or even get on the golf course and hide, wait till somebody hit their golf ball. If it landed within the patch of trees that were in an area that they had to approach the NT, um, we could go in there and throw the golf ball somewhere else, put it somewhere else, and then hide so as you can watch. And just before you got to the golf course, there was Dundas Lane, and behind Dundas Lane was the old brickworks, and next to the brickworks was the clay pits, which they obviously dug down to get. And obviously, because it was clay, water would lay in the bottom. I've told you this before, I think, where we used to get wood, and maybe a hammer and some nails, which we would secretly hide. Maybe bring the nails one day, some way or other, even go and buy them with our pennies, and add all these bits of wood together and make a small float, which we could hide in the bushes somewhere. Go and take them out, go down into the clay pits. Other pieces of wood were hidden in other trees. And we will take these out and stand on these boards, and we could paddle across the water, which was rather dangerous really, because I don't think all of us were swimmers.
No.
But then again, switching to swimming very briefly, we would pick a morning that was coming, normally the weekend, possibly a Sunday, and we would all meet at, I don't know, say 9:30, 9:45, get on their bikes, cycle like the devil from Copner up to Eastney, get on the beach. I've told you the story before about laying the towel on the ground, putting the bathing costume on top, and saying, ready, steady, go, undress, get the costume on, and get into the water. Last one in had to pay a forfeit. So that was that. Our parents didn't know what we got up to exactly. We told them we played cowboys and Indians, and when of course the war came along, when we got slightly older, between say 8 and 9, we played the Germans versus the British, of course.
Yeah.
Because we were fighting Germany, and so we would play many games on that variation of, right, you've got to walk back, I don't know, say 20 or 200 yards to a certain spot. And invariably one of us may have had a watch or something, but by the time we walked back, they would go and hide somewhere in the opposite direction, and we had to go and hunt them, because they were all bad Germans and we were all the good English. And we would have to shoot them. So you would creep up to, I think I saw something move in the bushes over there. So they must have hidden somewhere amongst these bushes. And so we would creep along on that, brush the dirt off, make sure it wasn't muddy. And it was at your knees that were covered in, what's that on your knees? But sometimes we would act a bit and pick up tufts of grass and get to a place where there was water. Might use the clay pits, don't go too close to the water. Get the grass wet and or damp, shake it off and rub it on our knees to get the dirt off our and off our hands. But in regards to the attitude of the brain, I think we were orientated as an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, that sort of age, towards things in the war. But because we didn't know what time the Germans were coming to bomb Portsmouth, which they did, we couldn't go too far unless we gave specific instructions as to where we would be.
Sure.
On the odd occasion, maybe a parent would come to that area, shout out their child's name, because it would normally be maybe one of my brothers, because my sister was at work and one brother wasn't old enough, I forget where, he would probably go and play a game of snooker over the snooker hall. But then he was 14 and 15. But he knew roughly where we would be, and he would come across and he would shout out names. Normally it was Ken, because I was his brother.
Yep.
And we all came back from there, and and went home because they started to bomb early. That did daylight bombing. But most of the bombs that I experienced in the war was at night time. I'm just going to go and stand in the end of the shelter, Mum. Do not go outside. And if it gets noisy out there, you come back in here. And so we would go back into the shelter. So children of modern age will have experienced those times when we could sometimes go in a shelter, hear a lot of bombing, fairly close by, and we would walk from the street shelter, not the one in our own garden.
Mm-hmm.
We would walk from the street shelter back to the house, and on the way back, you could say, "Oh, look over there. They bombed Chichester Road," and there was maybe 4 or 5 flattened houses where either a landmine or a bomber dropped, or even a fire going with incendiaries.
Did you ever see a bomb drop? Did you ever actually see it with your own eyes, or just the results?
No, I don't. I can't remember seeing a cylinder full of flares. No, they normally came down singly. I told you about the time a neighbour that lived along when my father couldn't join. He tried to join up, and he was told he was too old. And anyway, so he got to join in the ARP. So he was an air raid person who watched out for fire bombs and warned people about them to maybe stop in their house or help try to put the fire out with sand, and because everybody had outside of their house like a bucket of water and a tub of sand or something, rather to throw on a firebomb.
Do you remember?
My father went along, I've told you this before, where this person had a fire in the house and was out in front. No, I've got a fire, I got incendiary. And my father went in, and I'm not sure about this, but I think it had come through the roof and with force fallen on the floor. I think it might have been a large incendiary bomb. And my father got it on the end of his shovel, that's part of and he threw it out the window. He threw it out the window because he was in the front room. Anyway, and then he sort of went about putting the fire out that was in our front room. Whether he stayed out to clear up, I don't know. But all I remember afterwards, when I think it was the next day, a policeman knocked the door. I don't think I went to the door to open it. And he found out he was being charged of breaking the windows. He said, well, the house could have got on fire if she'd have wanted. So anyway, the officer took the statement and he had to sign it, and then it was forgotten. It was written off. And I think the police went back and said, we've got nothing in the bed. Shall we tell all the Germans to drop their fire bombs on your house so I can get a really big hole? No. Well, no. Well, just thank this man here then for having the thought of, couldn't walk through the front room door and out of the front door. The quickest way, because the flames were everywhere, was to get rid of the bomb, which is stood to one side of, because it was just like spewing out fire, and to put the fire out that was in the middle of the front room. I'll have a quick drink.
Yeah. Do you recall when you were in the shelters, when the sirens went off, you might not remember, but do you remember roughly how long you were in the shelters for? Was it like an hour or half a day?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think I told you the story. My mother she come out of her room, which was like her room in the house where she slept, and she had all her knicks and knacks and stuff in there, because most of her stuff had been given away, of course. Because her husband had died, he was a couple of years older than her, and she was getting on. And what was I going to say? Oh, that's right. She said to Alice, my mother's name was Charlotte, she only had one name. Charlotte, yeah, get that boy at 7 o'clock. Air raid shelter. So we will go to the brick built air raid shelter. This is when we lived in Chichester Road, number 159, Chichester Road.
Mm-hmm.
Beardy Road, I can't know, Palmerston Road. Anyway, we would go into this shelter just a few roads along, and we would come out and we would see various buildings weren't there anymore. Well, the only piles of rubble where the bomb had fallen on it and exploded and blew the house apart. Because you could hear these bangs. So when the bangs were quite close, we had to run from the doorway back into the shelter where our seats were.
Yeah.
And sometimes we had cushions and various things to make it comfortable.
So how long were you in there for, roughly? Was it like the whole night?
Sometimes it might be until it got light. And obviously the airplanes used to clear off then.
Yeah.
They come a lot, a night bombing. So in the sort of winterish times, when it got dark early in the evening, that's when the bombing started earlier. And
yeah.
Or it may have been that my grandmother would shout out at 6 o'clock, not 7 o'clock. Alice, fetch that boy. That was me.
Were there many families though, or was it just your family?
Yeah, we were probably in the shelter. They only had struts on wooden struts, and if you wanted a quiet, soft seat, you had to take your own cushion.
Yeah.
And you would lean back against the brick wall with another cushion or some sort of implement.
So how many people were normally in there then?
Well, sometimes it got full up. Other times you could maybe lay on the sheet, but most times you had to sit up straight. And if it got very noisy and very heavy with the bombing, and it was not so much the dockyard being bombed, but being dropped everywhere or anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
That's probably when you got more people in the shelter. Some people will come in, they will start telling stories, and you hear a certain amount of crying going on because they were telling stories about their children and where they lived, or sisters or brothers or other relatives in different parts of Pompeii, I suppose.
Yeah.
And how they went into the air raid shelter, which was dug in the garden, because there were two types of. I think it was called an Anderson shelter. That was a brick-built one, but most of them was, I forget what they were called now. Anyway, sheets of metal, and they used to dig a big hole, maybe about 6 feet square, and you used to take all your bits and pieces down, because in there you had fresh water, which that was put in there like while it was still light.
Yeah.
And we might have a light in there, which was obviously a paraffin lamp stuck near the door, but it couldn't be too near the door with a light shining out because it would show a light.
Yeah.
So it was built in such a way that the fresh air would come in and it would take the smell of the paraffin that was burning inside the lamp. And you'd have like a camper's kit in the shelter, so you could make you take in your milk and tea and sugar and stuff, and maybe something to eat, and which obviously your mum and your big sisters had ready, and you would have like a tea party in the shelter.
Yeah.
Which used to cause a few laughs, especially if you weren't careful and you'd put your cup or your mug on the floor of the shelter, which was concrete,
Mm-hmm.
And the shelter was covered over with dirt.
So I guess your sleeping pattern went a little bit haywire.
They went haywire. Yeah, you didn't sleep very well, and you heard noises. I think my brother, who was a builder in those days, before he joined the RAF, he went away. And then after the war had finished, a lot of the work he had was replacing ceilings.
Yeah.
Because in those days it was the rafter joints going across, and nailed to them was the laths, and they were just plastered on top, with bare plaster on top of the laths, which obviously it's a squeeze up between the gaps and that goes solid, and that fallen at the ceiling.
Mm.
So he was very busy repairing people's ceilings where they got cracked. Because sometimes you might have a gun going along the street, and it would get to a place where there's not too many buildings, and there's just terrific bangs, and it was maybe 50 yards, depending on where the air raid shelter was that you were in.
Yeah.
But because we lived in this road that led from going across the fields to Langston, I've told you about, which are all open, of course. That's where Paul has now got his allotment, just over the railway lines, and on the right as you go over down Burfield Road.
Yeah.
Go down Burfield Road, across the railway line, and just on the right is where all the allotments were made. It's got a fence in that built round them now, but when I was young there was no fence there.
Mm.
And that's where we used to pin some of our potatoes from to cook on the fire over at the clay pits.
Yeah. I'm guessing you were on rations, were you, at that point?
Sorry?
I'm guessing you were on rations?
Baffins?
Rations. Food rations.
Oh, food rationing was on. Oh, yeah. Go along and say, my mother didn't have any corned beef last week, and you maybe get 2 slices of corned beef, because you come in a big tin.
Yeah.
And everything was rationed. But the thing that I noticed when my father was moved from Portsmouth Dockyard to Helensburgh on the Clyde,
Mm-hmm.
obviously in Scotland, and we went up on holiday for, I was away a few weeks because I went to school up there, Hermitage College in Helensburgh. We pronounced it Helensburgh, but it was Helens, Burth, on the Clyde, and we went in to get the rationings. I went in with my mother. I don't know where Jockey was. He must have maybe been playing football or something, I don't know. Anyway, my mother and I went and did the shopping, and we called into the butcher's. So she went to the butcher's and gave her ration books to the chap behind there, and he said, the person that we lodged with, that my father lodged with, and allowed my brother and I to sleep there for a while, because I went to school there. He was well placed in the dockyard at Helensburgh. He was sort of up the ladder a bit.
Yeah.
And Shepherd was his name. Isn't that marvellous? That's what he says. He says, you're talking to me about something, and all of a sudden he said, you'll stop. Put your hand up. I said, well, I remember their name. He said, oh, Joe. I said, about 6 or 7, whatever it was. Anyway, I remember going to the shop with my mother, and I would be, well, when war broke out, I was 8. So about, let's say 9 or 10. Anyway, we went to the shop. I can almost picture it now. And this was the butcher. We won't use this today, Mrs. Ross, because he knew their name, because he knew Spot Shepherd.
Sure.
I don't know why he was called Spot Shepherd. but this was like a single man who stayed single, and he was like a boat architect. I don't know what the technical name is, but he would draw pictures of boats, with the size of the lengths and this, that, and so on, etc.
Yeah.
And all round his big flat, which is only him there, of course, which is where my father lodged, because he was working there, and they had to find him digs, and anyway, people that were on their own, whatever, were more or less forced to accept a lodger, a worker from down south.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, you know, and of course, because we lodged with Spot Shepherd, because the temporary address was like, I can't think of the name of the street. It might come to me. He knew that was where Spot Shepherd lived. There's a butcher. So whether they were businessmen in the village or the town, small town, and yeah, Mr. Ross, you won't need that today. And he never took my mother and cut out the coupon for that meat. He said, you can spend that elsewhere, can't you? He said, oh, I forgot to cut it out.
Do you remember much about when it all started? Like, you know, like, oh, this is all happening now. This is what we're going to have to do from now on. Do you remember anything about that at all?
Yeah, there were various rules and regulations brought in as all the
like,
warnings. You will not have a light in your hallway showing. If you had a knock at your door late in the evening, you would go to the front door and you would ask who it was at the door, and you could both get down to the letterbox and he could push it in and you could hold it up. Let's say it was somebody, a fireman or something, or an ARP man, which they were like firemen of sorts. And you could talk to each other through the letterbox, but you needn't open the door because you had a light on. But a little tiny light coming to there. So then, can you still hear me? Yeah, I can still hear you. And so they would stand outside and you would talk through the letterbox this side. You had the light on, but the only was maybe just the outside of the letterbox.
Yeah.
Maybe visible from outside, but not normally, because obviously the flap would come and push against that. So things of that nature. And what's the time? I better go and get the blackouts ready. So at a certain time of an evening, depending on what it was, maybe there was a broadcast, maybe there wasn't, that you would put up your black curtain above your normal curtains.
Yeah.
This is what they used to say to you on the radio. Okay, if you got your, you know, you'll probably need your blackouts put up at 6:16 tonight. That's the very latest. Not quite quarter past the hour. Make sure you put up in your front rooms, and make sure your back rooms are secure. And that as if you're going to your garden for any reason to visit your shelter, you make sure that the lights are not on by the kitchen door going out to your backyard, and the lights are on. Shut your living room door leading into the kitchen, go out into the kitchen in the dark, then open the door, then use your torch to find a way down to the air raid shelter.
Yeah.
So we used to get little funny broadcasts like that. But always a reminder of, put that bloody light out! Because somebody had forgotten all the black curtain they just draped over the top of the railings at the top of the window and slipped off, and they got the light on.
Yeah.
So of course, they rush across there and put out the light. Careful how they went so they don't fall and hurt themselves because of all the furniture, and then try and pick up this blanket or whatever they were putting up, this black out over the curtain rail. Make sure it was secure. Is that, you sure it's all right? Yeah. Let me have a look with a torch, because you know you had the blackout there, and you could hold up. Yeah, Well, you got pegs to peg it to the existing runner or whatever was used in the window.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there were lots of sort of fun and games that happened with because of the aero boarding. But it was good for a child because, as I say, I loved it because everything was black. Nobody could come to the door with a light on. So if you knocked at the door and almost running and hide round the other side of their bay window.
Yeah.
So the door was here and the bay window was there. You could knock the door there, maybe go and hide round this side of the window. So they would open the door and have a look. No street lights, no car lights, no nothing on. So whatever darkness is in the air, so to speak, was all they had to try and see you. But invariably what we did was knock the door, we pre-planned it, or we gone up to the house and there was an alleyway straight across from this house here with a good escape if you had to run like hell. Because they couldn't see you running, they could only hear your footsteps.
Yeah.
And so we used to have a great time of knocking the door, running like hell. And one time, there's along Cotton Road. We were other side of Chichester Road. Queen, I think it's called Queen's Road, that runs all the way down to Kingston Road, near where the Majestic cinema is over there, and Queen's Road was here. We had just gone down there. I'm not sure which little gang I was with at the time, but we were quite a long way from where I lived over at Dartmouth Road here. And there was a couple of other roads, the Burning Road, Chichester Road, Queen's Road. And he had tightened the door knockers. He had it loosely, and there's some way of tying it quickly with a loose knot, banging on the door, if they had a glass partition in their front door, which is normally covered, but sometimes you could see it was on, because they would switch their light on to see the hallway, then switch it off, and then come to the front door. Well, in that small amount of time, that knot had been pulled, but it had pulled too tight, banged the door, locked the door, and then yanked the rope, the small length of rope tight, because in between the two front doors that were close together was that much of a wall, which is obviously running down the whole length of the house.
Yeah.
And we would be hiding in maybe the front garden of the houses next door, but invariably we didn't do that too often. Most of the time it was near an alleyway. And all of a sudden you hear this horrible clanging, because both people were trying to, bloody get to you, bloody kids again. And they were trying to open the door, but they're both trying to open the door. So the door was, because it had been tied quickly, knotted, basically the second knot, because the first lock was locked, and that was really, really tight. And then again, there wasn't much of a droop in the rope across that wall I'm talking about. And so they were pulling it, and so the doors were giving a little bit. I'll bloody kill you, kids. And then we say, come on, we better go. Because that clanging is the door knocker on the floor.
Yeah.
So they pulled it off.
That's funny. Do you remember hearing, this is more about what was going through your mind, when it was all ending, like you were in the shelter, it's like, okay, we don't need to do that anymore, guys, it's all over. Do you remember anything about that kind of period?
No, I don't. When the blackout stopped, what are you doing? There's no blackout anymore, the war's finished. But invariably people knew it was finished because the ration books were getting easier. Not sort of overnight, but that's from so-and-so. bacon will not be on the ration, nor there will cheese, nor there will spam, and they were mentioned various foods. And everywhere you went to shop, and it seemed to be for years afterwards, Mark, I always remember a loaf of bread cost 4 pence.
Yeah.
That's it. Think what you pay for a loaf of bread now is a pound old, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 pence. And there were several other things that that were very, very cheap. But most people seem to have done their bit because there was no barriers at the front door. All the metal gates, fancy, metal, and the iron gate, and the railings that went on top. In front of your house is normally a small garden, maybe this deep, and along where the window is, there was this brick wall about so high, with a layer of concrete like a pillow about so big with a rounded, and in there there was all the railings. Of course, when the war started, they come along with their blowtorches and cut them where it joined into this bedding on top of the wall.
Yeah.
And they loaded up the carts and took them away for making munitions. So people never had any gate or. So it was heaven for kids.
It's a funny story.
Yeah, yeah. But when, as I say, when it all finished and people gradually got used to it, I went in this morning and I went out, I got this, and they were adding up the different foods that they were able to then get, Can I have some corned beef? Yeah, how much would you like? Like your 2 slices, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
But we went along to this butcher shop that we always went to. And I say, yeah, we're the Ross children. Oh, right. Okay. 3 slices. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I just think the children then, in their ways of thinking, still play the normal games, football, so on, etc. Except if a siren went and then you cleared everything, so everybody got out of the way or under shelter. Especially in Pompey, of course, because they come and bomb the dockyard.
Yeah.
So if you lived anywhere near there, you were likely to find a house gone in the morning or just a pile of rubble.
Yeah. Do you, I don't know, but with the shelters that were there,
Yeah.
was it a shelter per street or per block, or how did how did the shelters work?
Well, the air raid, an air raid shelter in the street will be about 6 foot wide, with bent seats, like a stool with 3 slats on the top.
Mm-hmm.
An open doorway with a curtain, keep out the dust and that if the bomb landed close by.
I'm just trying to work out how many people it's for. Is it for a row of houses? The
number of people you could get in there, you could probably sit about 30 each side on these benches, and make sure that children hadn't been hiding in them or gone in and been to toilet in the in the toilets at each end.
Yeah.
No, at the first end, the entrance was there, and the toilet at the end, which is basically a bucket, not a bucket, a bin. Awful.
Mm.
Yeah, some people to come in. I think I've got a vague memory of the odd time a dog was brought in, but invariably the animals were left to their own devices, inside the house.
Yeah.
or maybe locked in the shelter in their own garden, if they happen to have one. But they like to be with other people, so they would come into the sort of public shelters. But you would be driving down the road and you have to move out because there was just enough room between the curb, and the road starting. So there was the guttering to take the water, and then from the edge of the, if you like, let's say the guttering was built of stone, whatever, that was left clear so that water could run down by the side of the shelter. So when you opened the door of the shelter, invariably there was not always a piece missing at the bottom of the door to get into the shelter, so it would miss the pavement.
Yeah, makes sense.
That deep. Or the rain. Can't think of anything else, Mark. Anything special?
That's right. That was good.
Oh, it was good to watch the airplanes flying over and see the searchlights on them and the shells bursting around them. That was quite interesting. Come in! Get in. Because you'd gone outside the front door a bit too far of the door. And especially, not every time, but there would probably be somebody in the shelter, like air raid warden, a policeman, anybody in uniform who was on leave or something. Because I think most of the people that were service people used to wear their uniforms all the time.
Yeah.
As against putting on civvies occasionally. Because they can almost get away with murder, and sometimes they go in somewhere and they sit down, so I forget the money. There's a cup of tea and a slice of toast or something.
Sure.
So that's all I can afford, but there you are. And they would be served that in a cafe. Well, they would go in and the fourpenny meal was tuppence. So they saved 2 pennies. Yeah, things of that nature happen.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Not very often, but then again, there was a very helping hand type situation amongst everybody. People became more friendly and more doors open to welcome you in. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. Have you got any other questions you can ask?
Not off the top of my head, so I think I quite like that as a section, so I think we'll call it there.
Yeah, okay.
And then we'll do another one next time.
Okay.
So wave goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And we'll speak again soon.